Dr. Eddie Murphy, thanks for joining me on the Mindful podcast.
Thank you, Dermot. Eddie's fine. Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking me.
Well, you've earned the doctor. You might as well say it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know,
yeah, sure.
If I had a doctor, I'd be saying it to everybody.
Oh, well, you know, sometimes it can, look, Eddie's good. Yeah, it's fine. I'm good with that.
Okay, Eddie, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about anxiety?
Okay, so when I think about anxiety, I want to back up a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
If that's all right. I often think about, like, where is this anxiety coming from? But really, when I think about, in life, we have 5 big emotions, okay? And have a guess, Darren. Put you on the spot. You're putting me on the spot.
I'm going to go joy.
Yeah. Love, joy and happiness. We'll keep that in one area.
Okay, great. Anger?
Definitely. Some people are imploders. Some people are exploders. And what's really interesting is when we look at anger, can be often linked to anxiety. But when we look at those imploders, people who suppress their anger, quite often we know that it can impact on their cardiac health. Higher levels of blood pressure, cardiac. We call it toxic in as opposed to toxic out.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so joy, anger, sadness.
Definitely. Best buy in class here, you know that.
I got 3 out of the 5. This is my sweet spot. 60%. Joy, anger, sadness.
I'm not going to let you hang, right?
Give me some of the other ones.
So basically, fear, obviously.
Yeah.
Here we are talking about anxiety. That's the big one.
Well, I guess that's a good sign. I mustn't be too fearful at the moment. I would have thought of it.
I'm making you very comfortable. Like, that's good. And then the last one is disgust.
Disgust.
Yeah, that's often the most challenging one for people when we talk about our big 5 emotions. So if you think about, just quickly on disgust, if you think about grabbing a random 3-year-old and giving them a lemon to bite, and just imagine their face.
Yeah.
And their face would be, oh, disgusting. Okay, now I should say I have mandatory child reporting requirements, so you can't just grab random 3-year-olds and give them lemons, okay? But you can do a bitter and sweet experiment with maybe a bit of ice cream. But when we internalize disgust, it's sort of, I am disgusting. I am not worthy. I am unattractive. This is the sort of whole area of body image, body confidence, self-esteem.
Would shame and guilt be in there? Maybe we're disgusted with our behaviour in the past, something like that.
Yeah, so they can be really linked to that.
Yeah.
So it can be linked to that as well. So that's and it's quite often it's an emotion, and around both young boys, young girls, teenagers, adults can get really stuck with that, and we'd often see that in the therapy room. That's another day, maybe another conversation. But, today we're talking, so fear is the big one, right?
Yeah.
So anxiety then, so the fear is a natural emotion, normal emotion. Fear can protect us, it's there to protect us. The problem is for individuals that struggle with anxiety, that fear is amplified and maybe misinterpreted or catastrophized, or so it's problematic because it's going to interfere with the person's life significantly.
So sometimes anxiety is portrayed as an entity in itself, almost like a virus that, oh my God, I have anxiety now. I'm an anxious person. The way you're talking, anxiety is kind of like having bald tires on your car. It's the result of a certain way of moving. Could that be like it's an effect of fear?
Well, it may be ineffective really because it has an impact on the person. But when you say that the anxious person or the person has, see, I'd be cautious about a person defining themselves in one area that I'm an anxious person, because a person is so much broader than that, and having. So a big theme for me is, so my background is clinical psychologist. They're trying to support individuals. Person comes to see me, I'll say, what, how can I help you, or what would be helpful? They'd say, I'm an anxious person, or I'm depressed person, or I'm depressed, or and I might even say, like, how long do you think you have that for? And they might say, that for 15 or 20 years or something like that. Or so I'm logging that a little bit in my head. I wouldn't necessarily get into a challenging space, but in my head I'm going, there's more for this person than they're an anxious person. I not going to take that out now. It's too early when I've just met them. But I can see that. I sort of can see that I want to support that individual for change, to say that maybe anxiety is part of their life, but it doesn't define them. I think that's really important, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this moves us into the idea of labeling, because there's a big growing trend, you know, to label yourself, particularly in social media. You see a lot of it, you know, that, you know, almost, I wouldn't say people wear the badge with pride, but sometimes we can be very quick to self-label or label other people, and maybe, you know, as you're touching on, it's not the correct thing to do. They're just experiencing something at that particular time that doesn't necessarily define them. How do you feel about the whole idea of labeling ourselves or having labels put on us?
I've sort of problem with it,
Yeah.
because I think labels are for tins of beans and not for human beings. So I do. I think, you know, labels are challenging, because if you give yourself a label, sometimes you have to live into that label.
Yeah.
So if you give if a person, not you, I mean the general you, we have to be cautious how we label things, because sometimes there's no alternative. So I would caution around now labels, but we'll say quite often, and this is going to sound contradictory, but quite often when it comes to anxiety, people use the term very loosely, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's important that we understand there's different types of anxiety.
Yeah, I'd love to go into that a little bit with you. It's I guess, as you say, sometimes it's a catch-all phrase, but what are the different types then that you come across in your work?
So if you think that, let's say, will I put you on the spot again now? Do you
go
want
on, go for it, yeah.
You never know. This is a Dermot masterclass on anxiety. So there are, what different types of anxiety? Have a go, a few anyway.
Okay, I'm going to go with social anxiety.
Okay, we're definitely going to talk about that, right? So do you want to talk about it as we go along, or just so we get them, okay, keep going. So social anxiety, keep going then.
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I don't know any other types.
So when fear gets problematic, I think I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry about that if I'm putting you on the spot. But we have generalized anxiety.
Okay.
That's people who will say worry all the time and are, you know, very concerned about, for example, bless him, my father, if the weather was really bad on the road, he'd ring me and say, be careful on them roads now, and make sure the lights are off, make sure the doors are locked, make sure. So he was doing health and safety like for the last 50 years, if that makes sense. He's quite a warrior, you know. People worry, but it can, worrying constantly can really impact on quality of life. So you've generalized anxiety. I have a pain in my head here now. That's definitely a brain tumor. I have a pain in my belly. That's bowel cancer. That's it.
Yeah.
That's health anxiety.
Okay, so that's a category up by itself.
Oh yeah, that's significant. Yeah. So health anxiety.
That's Dr. Google doesn't help, I suspect.
No, definitely not. So quite often, so I'll just go through them and then we'll break them out a little bit. So you have panic attacks, generalized anxiety, health anxiety, social anxiety, agoraphobia, the phobias, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're all within this anxiety-based family. And each one of them from a psychological intervention, have a different or have a bespoke type of intervention.
Interesting.
So if you're looking for an evidence-based approach, so we would look at what's the evidence base for the treatment of anxiety from a psychological point of view. So medications for some people play a role. There's many people on different types of medications. I would see medication like a life jacket on somebody, and psychology is about learning good swimming strokes and learning those strokes and therapy, getting back into the boat, and then you can review the life jacket. So I think it's a nice way of looking at it, because it's non-judgmental. It's for some people, they can come and say, I don't want to be on medication and I've been prescribed these, what can I do? For other people, they come and they're on medication and they want to come off them. And for other people to come to see us and to see me, and they'd say, these really work for me, but I'm come to see you as a psychologist, and they often think we're going to have a fight to get them off them. So you work with where the individual's at.
Yeah.
So those type of presentations are, you can see what fear gets problematic. What happens if you think about fear is like as our brain gets more complex, our emotions get more complex. So it can manifest itself so whether it's the panic attack, which you've talked about your panic attack.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful, fearful experience. If I remember rightly, you said that you were brought in an ambulance that came. And I suppose the one thing that there's two things that struck out for me actually. So in modern psychology, we're acknowledge the past, what's going on for people. And we acknowledge, but we're really, really interested, Dermot, in what keeps the problem going. What maintains the problem? What's adding fuel to the problem? So say somebody comes to me and I'm listening to their story. So Mary comes in. Mary is experiencing panic attacks, and I'm listening to the experience. And sometimes the panic attack is a symptom of what's going on in their life.
Yeah.
As opposed to necessarily panic is the problem. So we'll work through addressing the panic attack. Could be a feature of a person that might have had social anxiety. I'll try and bring some of the clinical cases in. So, for example, when we look back, Mary came in with panic attacks. That was a symptom of social anxiety. Because she had social anxiety, she used alcohol to try and help her get into social situations. That alcohol became heavy use alcohol, a bit of dependency on the alcohol. So when you went back through it wasn't treating around the dependency. It wasn't treating around the panic attack. It was treating the social anxiety became the key to unlocking it for her.
Yeah.
So
see, when you're describing that now, I feel like you were describing me 15 or 20 years ago.
Okay.
You know, and I know that we were at an event recently ourselves.
Yeah.
And you saw me speak, and afterwards you were like, I think you had social anxiety. And interesting enough, you said that's the most missed anxiety of all the categories we've just mentioned.
Yeah. Social anxiety is the most missed of all anxiety presentations. About 13% of presentations. And it's a very debilitating one. There's a really good website called socialanxietyireland.com out there with lots of information. For social anxiety breaks down into specific social anxiety and more generalized social anxiety. So a specific one would be being asked to go up and give a presentation or like best man speech or talk after a funeral. Some people really struggle with that, but they can work well within a crowd. You know, for other people, they would really struggle in a group situation, maybe in college or doing a presentation. And what happens is in social anxiety, so just going back to what keeps the problem going, certain behaviors keep the problem going and certain thinking styles keep the problem going.
Yeah.
And I know actually the other thing that I picked up, and I didn't actually say it to you on the time, was you talked about, the first aid equipment that was given to you was from the ambulance.
A brown paper bag.
Right. So as a psychologist, I would say that's a safety behavior. It keeps the problem going. It's not going to assist you.
The brown paper bag?
Yeah. Because some people end up bringing, when the panic attacks, stuff like that, they can bring around a brown paper bag as a rescue tool, okay? So that's like a safety behavior. Like I can't go outside because I need to bring my brown paper bag with me. And it's sort of a reminder that you're still not fully in control of your anxiety because I'm carrying this around with me. So it's...
Well, I think the number one factor for me was alcohol.
Okay.
Like that... alcohol is, I call it a wrecking ball to my nervous system.
Yeah.
Like, and if I want to be off kilter and doubting myself and worried and, you know, lose my lovely sense of joy that I have 99% of the time, alcohol is what's going to do it. You know?
Well, alcohol is gone. There's a total link between anxiety, particularly panic attacks, and like that Monday, Tuesday morning, maybe after a heavy weekend. There's a very strong link to that. So we go, what keeps anxiety going? What keeps fear going?
Mm.
And the biggest ones, I'll just take you maybe a little bit through this.
Yeah.
If that, okay. So we talked about safety behaviours, so for some people. But the biggest one now, if you think, the easiest way to describe it, I think is a phobia. Okay?
Yeah.
So if I brought my friendly snake in here, would that bother you, Dermot?
Personally, no.
Okay.
I like snakes.
Okay. And spiders, are you okay with that?
If you were putting tarantulas on my legs to crawl around, I might be a little bit anxious, all right?
Okay, and my favourite thing to bring is a black rat.
Okay, rats, not a fan.
Okay, so what gets activated?
Well, I guess, when you mention rats?
Yeah, like if I brought one in, look, I have one here. If you can check out the video and you can see it.
Yeah. Well, certainly my fear response, my stress response would be activated in that moment.
Okay, and I'll ask your listener viewers to say, what's the most likely behaviour that you would do? I
would recoil. I would run away or back out of the room at least.
Exactly. And that's avoidance, avoidant behaviour. And avoidant behaviour is the most common behaviour associated with any of the anxieties. And avoidance always keeps anxiety going. Avoidance always keeps fear going. And in life, it's not about the spiders or the rats or the snakes. Quite often we're avoiding. We avoid having conversations that we need to have. We often walk on eggshells around people. We often say yes when we really want to say no. And these are avoidances.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, right?
Would people pleasing be part of that?
Yeah, it can be, yeah. Yeah, it is. That's what I'm saying, that we're avoiding having sometimes hard adult conversations, healthy conversations. So the whole area of avoidance is huge. And when panic attacks, people often avoid go back into the situation that they had the panic attack in. Or if they in post-traumatic stress, they often so a person might have been involved in a road traffic accident or where they've been in a bad crash, and they often describe how they could see in the rearview mirror the car coming up behind them, and how the big noise bang of the airbag and the sort of silicon dust. And sometimes they thought that the engine was going to go on fire because there's steam and smoke coming out of it. It's actually the water breaks on the engine and the steam comes up. But your brain doesn't work like that in the moment. You sort of think it's going on fire.
But I remember after a particularly bad crash I had years ago, it was the sound of a screeching tire. If I heard that, I would immediately be in not a panicky state, but it would definitely trigger something in me.
Sure. So that whole avoidance is something that we treat in the therapy space.
How do you treat that then?
Okay, so we would bring the person back to, for example, we would bring the person back to the side of the road, maybe where the accident happened, and we'd go through it and ask the person to well, in the first instance, sometimes we'd ask them maybe to record it, we'd on a voice and listen to it in therapy, so to go through it, because you see, memory or avoidance can be like a beach ball. You know, you push the beach ball down, it'll pop back up.
Yeah.
It pops back up. And if you try to avoid thinking about it or talking about it or engaging with it, it's intrusive. It cuts through. This is what happens in the area of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, obsessive compulsive. I'm not a big fan of the words disorders. It's the phraseologies that are used, but it's how we talk with clinicians in whatever Germany or America, that we're using the same criterion. But we've different techniques in therapy to support an individual if they're engaged in avoidant behaviour. So, for example, a classic one would be someone might have a avoidance around had a panic attack in a supermarket. So we'd ask the person to go back to the supermarket. Obviously, we'd use some of the really healthy breathing tools to support them into place, to get back into that place. So they have, instead of an anxiety response, we would train them with a relaxation response and then bring them into the place that they're anxious. And that's really powerful. In the therapy for panic attacks, we actually induce a panic attack in session 4 or 5. We don't tell that person that's session 1.
Yeah.
But it's the most powerful. It's the most powerful way intervention. So we've done a lot of breathing work and the body work and the thinking work, and it's okay. And how we do that is we ask them to hyperventilate. So we go through hyperventilation so that they're changing the blood gases. That's what happens when people have this panic attack. And by inducing a panic, like the symptoms, the heat, the high heart rate, the feelings of being out of control. And then when the person, now we're going to engage the tools that we've been working on. The person then doesn't need the brown paper bag anymore. They don't need to bring it around because they've learned I can control this within me. Yeah. I have the thinking tools. I have the breathing tools to be able to control this. I have the understanding. And then sometimes I think it's helpful when it comes to anxiety to think about sort of like 0 to, if you imagine a scale of 0 to 100. And if you have a lot of stress going on in your life, and I'd ask you maybe to think about if you were to give yourself a score, you know, if you're on stress. So if your score is, is sort of 80, we'll say, on stress, your reservoir is only 20. It doesn't take a lot then to tip over. Whereas if you are able to practice really good self-management, self-care, being authentic, being able to, I think a lot of people, they put a front on in the world and they neglect their real self. And if you're able to just be real and, you know, we make little mistakes or whatever, that's just life. You know what I mean? When you just acknowledge it, and when you acknowledge maybe some of your you know, pieces in your life or whatever, you sort of carry less of a load. But then you're moving, if you're moving into that area where your stress levels are, we all need stress to get out of bed in the morning. But, you know, it's when it's hitting that 60, 70, 80, your reservoir is closing down. Whereas if you're traveling around a 40, well, you have a sort of a 60% piece there. You know, you can take on more.
Isn't that the issue at the moment? There's a lot of people who are just so busy and so frantic that they have very little reservoir. So something happens, something comes up, or maybe just whatever stresses they have is increased for some reason, or maybe suddenly now they're looking after an elderly parent and they weren't before. Something's added into what I call the life soup at that particular time, and now the wheels start to come off. So they're totally. So for me, I'm bereaved, and that my mum died last October. Okay, so it's relatively 6 months, and we're caring for my dad. He's 89, fabulous, and but it's challenging. You know what I mean? I have 2 young kids, 16 and 14, like teenagers. They say you get fired at 13 and you get rehired at 24 if you're lucky. I'm not sure that I want to be rehired at this point. But the point is that there's a thing called the life event scale. It's an interesting scale that people can do. It's available there online and stuff like that. But I also think one thing it doesn't do, it doesn't add the upcoming year. And if you look at the life event scale, it gives a life stress index. So like death is a huge one, divorce. Some events can be quite positive, like having a new baby or, you know, for a new relationship or getting married, but they can still be quite stressful. Yeah. So you put this life event scale in, and also then I think prospectively what's coming up in the next year as well. That's the one thing it doesn't add in that scale, and that could be whatever it is that's going. Like, can be a significant piece going to happen in that, and that gives us there's an evidence base around that. Like that can give us a potentiality for a stress related illness. And that could be physical illness, or it could be psychological impact, such as anxiety as a present. So sometimes we have to look at anxiety in itself can be a symptom of something that's going on in our bigger world, the soup, the life soup. I'm going to steal that from you. Please do.
And then, other times then in itself, it can be significant. So like for an individual with severe OCD can be very crippling. So it can, hugely crippling. So I'm recalling to mind two gentlemen I saw who really struggled with is OCD, that he couldn't leave the house. And there was so many checks and compulsive behaviours or neutralising different types of behaviours because of so the person has a thought they're going to maybe... so with OCD, it comes in different categories. A person might have concerns about contamination, or they touch something and who touched that before me? And, there's so much mental energy, physical energy, emotional energy, such a challenge for that individual and their family. So there are significant, obviously PTSD, post-traumatic stress, very different subject, an area I specialise in. Talk to you about that maybe another time, but it's fascinating. But it's like when bad things happen to people. But then the bigger ones then are social anxiety that we talked about. I think that's, so the person, this person with general anxiety is worried about something happening to them. The person with social anxiety, they're almost like a lighthouse, and the beam is what is going outwards, and they're always concerned about what does that person think about me. So I'm sitting here now on the podcast, and if I had social anxiety, I'd be going, I wonder what Dermot really thinks of me. Does he think I'm a spoofer? Does he think I'm... But it's always like a negative evaluation that the person's engaged in.
Yeah.
So that whole area of how it's always like the person think it's around, am I unattractive? Am I unintelligent? Am I uneducated? Am I whatever, something negative? Do you understand me?
Yeah.
And that's, so the scan is out, and the person then says, right, how am I going to cope in the world like that? I'm going to hide in the world like that. So the person in social anxiety, very, brilliant people, have lovely, warm people, but they hide themselves. So they're embarrassed about themselves. They're like almost dying of embarrassment. There's
I'd love to ask you though.
And there's a difference between shyness, I think.
Okay, sorry, yeah, explain that then.
So shyness is one. So shyness and social anxiety is, a person can be shy, as in, but the whole piece is about the thinking style. The individual with social anxiety is thinking, I'm not good enough. They are. It's the thing. So the shy person, or some people might be introverted. They just like being in their own company.
Yeah.
I'm not great with my own company, actually. I like to engage with people and chat and connect. And that's, if I go training or running or something, I prefer to do it with somebody than do it on my own. But that's my style, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where, but an introvert is quite happy in their own company. So they're happy. It doesn't necessarily mean they have social anxiety. But the person with social anxiety wants to engage, wants to connect, but they struggle, and they might avoid social situations. So we're back to the avoidance again.
And I referred to myself as a 3-can man, in that I needed 3 cans. I remember when I was in university,
right,
before I would feel settled in myself, say around a table in the pub. I'm thinking I was in Trinity, and I can see myself in the buttery bar there, and I would need... I don't know how consciously I thought it, but I was racing to the end of the 3rd can or pint, which meant I knew that I'd be sitting kind of, I'd feel like I could relax at that point. So if I had 3 cans now, I'd be completely shit-faced. I'd be useless. But I needed it. I thought I needed it so I could just relax and kind of, and maybe, I guess what I was doing was I was turning the volume down on the little voice. Was going, they think you're small, or you look too young, or they think you're stupid because you're from Limerick, or whatever was going through my head at that time, And
there's a link between your brown paper bag and your 3 cans.
Is there?
Yeah. Because they're both a safety behaviour. And that goes back to what's keeping the problem going.
Yeah.
What behaviours are keeping the problem going? Is it avoidant behaviour? Is it a checking behaviour? Like often checking can keep anxiety going. I need to check this, I need to check that. Can be, I think also the way modern sort of, social media and whatever, this checking and screen, the doom scrolling and all this type of thing. But it's sort of a checking behaviour as well.
Yeah.
Am I missing out and stuff?
Sometimes you find yourself reaching for your phone and opening it up and opening up an app, an email app or something, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? I just did that without even thinking.
Yeah.
But sort of automatic checking.
Yeah.
Have I got any new updates? Has anything changed in the last 5 minutes?
And they're all I think they add into that 0 to 100 scale. They sort of feed in a little bit and sort of crank it up a little bit. But so we have checking, avoidance, and safety behaviour, and reassurance seeking is another one. So reassurance is saw this lovely lady. She'd panic attacks, and she'd be going out to school with her kid in the morning, and she'd a pram as well, and a school going kid, a young kid in a pram. And she'd wait for another lady to walk by the door, and she'd come out and go, "Hi, Mary, how you getting on?" "Grand, yeah." But she was basically always walking with somebody else, so that if she had a panic attack, somebody was around to be with her kids.
Okay.
So it's like a safety then.
Yeah.
And then she might check, with a family member or something like that. Do you think I look okay? Do you think I'm fine? Do you think I'm all right? What do you think? Do you think it'd be okay to go there? Some of the checking behaviour can be very overt, like it's very obvious. Some of it can be very covert as well. Not, So when we start uncovering what keeps it going, we're now into a position. We've got keys. We've got keys to sort of to support a person behaviourally or then cognitively. Some people people wear a lens. People with anxiety wear a lens, and the particular lens they might be wearing can be. They see threat when things are neutral, but they see threat. Something bad might happen to me. I have to be on alert.
Yeah.
And so, the error, if you want, the thinking error is catastrophizing. So a bad thing might happen, but the person will catastrophize it.
Yeah. So
that's what happens, we'll say, with health anxiety. I remember a gentleman came to me. He would have had an ectopic beat, which is sort of like a heart,
like an extra heartbeat.
An extra heartbeat, which is normal. Now, it's very important with health anxiety. Normally, these would be referred by GPs. They've had all the tests and etc. And then it's all negative, and then it's identified as, because you can have, this is very interesting about anxiety, is you can have very physical symptoms with a psychological origin. Okay, and it doesn't have to be some big bang thing that happened in your past or like a big bang thing. I'm talking about.
Well, we're going to hear from Caroline Foran in this episode, and she talks about the physical pain of her anxiety, particularly in the morning. Her body would be stiff and sore and aches and pains, and it was a really physical pain and discomfort that obviously was coming from an emotional, psychological place.
Yeah, so it can be. And quite often you'd have, it's very, and one thing about anxiety is also, it's very good for, as well, before a person does maybe counselling or psychology, Psychological Society of Ireland have a website and a list of psychologists throughout the country, is a GP actually workup, because thyroid can be, want to get ensure that there's good blood workup, to ensure there's no thyroid-based issues as well.
Yeah, because that can bring on...
It can be highly linked to increased heart rate and stuff like that.
Here's a question for you, and I've never been able to answer it.
Jesus, now
okay.
I'm going
to put you on the spot.
Yeah, you definitely put me on the spot. Go on.
I know so many fellow comedians, performers, entertainers, media people who definitely have exhibited forms of anxiety, either currently or in the past, or just... wired for anxiety.
Yeah.
Why in God's name are we all brought towards performing, standing on a stage and doing the very thing that brings up anxiety in people that aren't anxious? The public speaking, everybody looking at you. What's going on? Is it some kind of test? Are we... why are people who are prone to anxiety drawn to those kinds of careers, which seems totally counterintuitive? When you were talking about, avoidance and, this seems like the opposite.
Yeah. So first of all, two things. you said all. I know all, right? So in the therapy space, right, we tune in and go, that's a generalization now, right? But you are right, there are a significant amount, okay?
Yeah.
And,
no, I said I know a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
no,
yeah.
no. I'm just giving you a sense of what when we start listening to our thoughts.
Okay.
Our thoughts drive our emotions, and then when we're so it's really good to say when we start listening to our thoughts, then we're into that. We can change our thoughts.
Yes.
And when you change your thoughts, you can change your world, and that's the treatment if you think about it.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. First of all, it's very good. The problem. It's very good that a person confronts their anxiety, and quite a lot. It's totally counterintuitive. How do so many people, like comedians and stand-ups, and I've worked with quite a number actually.
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive. Why would they seek a space that they're extremely distressed in? If that makes sense, yeah, they're not comfortable. So I don't know. I think that's the creativity. The creativity. I think there's huge bravery in that. I think also if they flipped the way they think in that situation, they not necessarily. Some people feel like they might have to perform with that level of tension as well, that they use it as a creative flow. Some people are afraid, like when you work with some individuals, they're afraid to give up some of the maybe the safety behaviours or the drinking that might help them get into that space, or because they're afraid that they'll lose some of their creativity. They want to keep it a little bit on the edge, fly by the seat. Do you know? That can be a feature of it. So,
is it possible you can become addicted to the chemical setup that anxiety gives you?
I don't think so, really, because it's too distressing for individuals.
Yeah.
Because the person comes away totally exhausted. Like if you're talking about after that show, or it has a consequence over time. And quite often the consequence, actually, thanks Dermot for bringing that up, is if a person comes into you and their mood is low, right? So if a person has anxiety for a long time, their mood can drop. And sometimes when you come in, you might just see a person who's got, we'll say, depression, we'll say. But actually, the way I sort of think about it is it's anxiety and depression often can travel together.
Yeah.
Okay. And I often see it like a train. Like I want to know, like I'm trying to tease out what's driving this train. Did the person have anxiety and their mood dropped? Because if you treat the anxiety, the mood will lift, and then you treat it what caused the mood to drop. Or is it the depression and then the anxiety came so you need to figure out what it is that you're treating, so that you're targeting
How do you
the
unpick those?
But you can unpick them, going through a good clinical interview and speaking to the individual, understanding, but taking your comedian example there, for example, or your stand-up example, quite often the energy of trying to perform, the anxiety of that you're talking about that they've had, but the mood will just go down because it's very hard to sustain that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can, then you figure out what you're going to work with here. What's driving that train? Where you meet at the person? Is it at the low mood state, or is it at the anxiety state?
Before you go, I want to talk to you briefly about kids and teenagers, because I'm guessing you've a lot of people coming to you.
Yeah.
Generally saying, my son is doing the Leaving Cert, he's not in a good place, or I have a 10-year-old girl who won't go to sleep at night because she's afraid of everything and is in our bed. And like, are you seeing more of a rise of that?
Yeah,
what do you think is causing it?
So there's been an increase in levels of referrals for our anxiety-related presentations. Yeah, some of that is post-COVID piece as well. COVID really disrupted a lot of people's lives in different ways,
Yeah.
So, and I just think also, our phones are both a sword and a shield in terms of, the data is mixed on it, actually. Some people say the data is very clear in both ways. But I do think there's I have a 14-year and a 16-year-old, so one's in junior cert year. I think the education system doesn't necessarily cater for kids on the edge.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's a little bit of like a motorway. I think we have to there's so many different pathways for people now. It's a great thing. But I just think we need to continually to take the pressure off kids. I think the terminal exam, and I know there's continuous development, or there's different modules, but I think the terminal exam and Leaving Cert is at one level. I can see one hand say people say it's fair, but I think there's lots of unfairness in it as well. If you don't perform in the day and you have anxiety related issues and you're coming into it, or you had a bereavement in the month before or anything, so it has issues. It has significant issues. But for parents or like worrying about their kids, I think the global message is that people prevail. Kids are resilient. Kids do struggle as well. Kids with neurodiversity struggle. Kids with struggle in social context. So do I fit in? Like that's where the teenager brain is like, will I be liked? Does someone love? You know what I mean? Will I be liked? Am I cool?
Yeah.
And the quickest win to that is actually sleep, because that's the thing that's disturbed most is around is sleep. The quickest win to any of our mental well-being is the presence or absence of sleep. We can't do the work. Someone comes to see me like that, we need to get the foundation of sleep right before we can do some of the work. Yeah.
But isn't sleep is the first thing to go if you're racked with anxiety? Suddenly you're awake in the middle of the night worrying about everything that's ever happened to you since the age of 5.
Yeah, that's the generalised anxiety one, really, in terms of that presentation. But sleep can be the one to go. But I think also there are some good resources out there for parents as well. The Healthy Ireland in all the public libraries. There's a Healthy Ireland section. There's some useful resources and books there. There's good apps there. A Lust for Life is a school wellbeing resilience program. I was the psychology author on that for the 5th and 6th class. That's now available for every Irish school children, freely available. Hits all the sweet spots for primary school teachers if you're out there. And that's available. It's gone out to over 40,000 children now. It's in 30% of schools, and it's free to every school in Ireland, and it's based on a Netflix model.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
If somebody's listening to this and just feels like their anxiety has gone to a point where it's really affecting their lives, what would you recommend? Where do they go? Is it the GP? Is it?
I think it's good to reach out.
Yeah.
I think to connect. First of all, I would say stop and breathe. Stop and breathe. Slow down. Do a little bit of I think a GP is a good start, because it's good to connect in, get their thyroid function, etc. done. I think linking with a good counsellor at iacp.ie or Psychological Society, linking in with family and friends, then starting engaging in some self-care. I think the whole area of breathing, like you're doing, the whole area of meditation. And breathing is a key central focus in that. Wouldn't that be right, Dermot?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we know that the MBSR, that's mindfulness-based stress reduction, is probably the most evidence-based of all the mindfulness-type training interventions. That's an 8-week program. Committing into... I'm sort of cautious about this, but we know... I call it the power of the blue and the power of the green, right? So it's nature-based. It's being out in connecting with nature in forests, in fields, can be very soothing to our stress-related systems. Power of blue is like rivers, lakes, seas. But I don't want to be disingenuous and say, just go for a walk in nature. And I don't mean it like that, because that can be very disingenuous to someone really struggling.
Yeah.
But I think the best thing you can do is to develop good abdominal breathing.
As in breathing into your belly.
Yeah, breathing into your belly. Yeah. Taking a nice deep breath in, holding it for 4, then letting it out, letting it, in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. And even at that, you are changing your blood gases. You're making things move in the right direction. You're giving yourself a bit of perspective. Maybe thinking about what's the best thing I can do for me right now. Is there wise people in my life? What would they do if they found themselves in this situation? Will this situation matter in 6 months' time? Am I overreacting to something? What's the wise? I'm struggling for a wise mind piece here, but if there was a wise mind or a wise person here, what would they advise me? What would I say to my best friend if they had this situation? So some of these type of questions create new insights, new perspectives, and new ways of thinking. And then maybe, am I avoiding something? What am I avoiding? Is this a symptom of something going on that I'm avoiding in my life? What am I? Am I avoiding having that conversation? Am I staying in this relationship when I don't need to be staying in this relationship? Is there a toxicity associated with this? Looking at what's toxic in my life. Are there toxic people in my life? Are people energy drainers or are they energy givers? And finding then, I think, a space of, and this is what I think is interesting, Dermot, is, in quite often psychologists, for 130 years we've been asked, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with this person?
Yeah.
Clinically, but only the last 30 years psychologists have been asking, what keeps well people well? What keeps well people well? And having pleasure, meaning and engagement. So engaging in things that are giving us passion in our life. I'd invite your listeners to think, what are my passions? Have I got passions? Some people don't have passions because they haven't discovered them. And I'd say, find your passion in your life. Whether that, and we know it for some people through the science of positive psychology, authentic happiness. Martin Seligman would talk about the whole area of education. For some people, they can find this pleasure, meaning and engagement through education. For some people, they can find it through social justice, being good to others. And there's so many things happening in the world right now that being socially engaged and having social justice can be such a powerful thing, and such a powerful thing that we need. And for other things, it's about maybe putting energy into themselves, having something for themselves. And that could be maybe doing the power of the green and the power of the blue, or the mindfulness. And then for some people, it's about finding something bigger than themselves. And for some people, that can be nature, beauty, awe. And when you're engaged in your areas of your life where you are passionate about it, you have meaning and engagement, then you're into, and that's for me coming up here to talk to you today, to spread this message that for people, maybe they might take something on board. That gives me pleasure, because it gives me a meaning that some person who might struggle with anxiety might go, oh, there's something in that. If you can walk away today with one tool that you can use today, whether it's not avoiding or trying to capture catastrophizing thinking and shifting that, or engaging in more meaningful relationships, then you're on your way to having more purpose and pleasure in your life.
Beautifully put. Dr. Eddie Murphy, thanks so much.
Dermot, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.